Welcome again to these studies in the Gospel of Mark. In our last study we left Jesus hanging dead upon the cross. But Mark knew that that was not the end. And so he tells us the following in chapter 15 verses 42 to chapter 16 verse 8. It was preparation day, that's the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen, cloth, took down the body, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of the rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph saw where he was laid. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices, so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll the stone away from the entrance to the tomb?" But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in white robe, sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You're looking for Jesus the Nazarene, who was crucified. He has risen. He's not here. See the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone, because they were afraid. The gospel that commenced abruptly ends with similar suddenness. The burial of Jesus is briefly recorded, and then, gobsmacked by the empty tomb and the angelic testimony, the women are stunned into troubled silence. So to understand why Mark the author stopped so suddenly, we might recall that he commenced his story with the claim that he was writing the beginning of the account of good news centered in the person of Jesus Christ, whom he claimed was both the promised Messiah and incarnate God. The implication would appear to be that he hasn't both now placed before us the evidence for his claim as fully as he knew how, while recognizing that the evidence is so mind-boggling and out of this world that the fact that the angel now proclaims he is risen takes some time and reflection for those who are there to adjust to what he is saying. We know therefore that Mark is no credulous fanatic. He recognizes that the story he's telling is pretty crazy. But we notice also that Mark believes that, ridiculous as it may seem, there is fairly incontrovertible evidence for his claim. And Mark is convinced that the resurrection is the clincher of his argument, and that the evidence for such an impossible event is well attested. Mark is sure that the fact that the witnesses were matter-of-fact women and some pretty hard-bitten men, as we shall see, are hinted at in verse 7, who were as incredulous as we might be when faced by the same facts. This surely confirms that the facts are true. Mark recognizes that to take it in may take time. The witnesses could not deny what they had seen, but it took time for them to make sense of it. And so Mark invites us to stand in awe, even troubled, at the end of our pilgrimage with Jesus in his gospel, and to do so especially before the final episode of his story. And yet he implies this story, read by the down-to-earth, honest person, will, if they give time to think, lead them and others to the same conclusion as Mark himself. Jesus was God, united with a human nature, and the one who fulfilled the hopes and fears of all the years, and God's repeated promises of one who would deal with the mess occasioned by human sin. So Mark believes he said all he can. And he invites us to take his testimony seriously. It is, he says, pretty awesome. It's pretty scary. But I think it's true. What about you?